Welcome to Oak City Church, a family of learners, lovers, and givers sent. For more information, visit us online at oakcitychurch.com. Let us know if we can help you in any way. Thank you for listening.
So Isaiah 11, verses 1 through 10. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eye sees, or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together. And a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze. Their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. In that day, the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Susie, and thanks, John. Before I get started into this sermon, a couple things. One, that picture, if we could just delete that picture off of the computer of me in that hat. I agreed to wear the hat one time. I did not agree for the hat to be shown every single week. I don't see Emily in here. I'm assuming that this is her fault. So there's that. Last night we had our Christmas party, a movie night. That was great. Thank you to the people that helped out with that, and for everyone that came. That was a great night. These lights are great. The youth group decorated the church last week with some help, and so we appreciate you doing that, and grateful for that. We are in an Advent series. We as a church have been in the Gospel of Mark, and we're going to continue in that after the new year, but we've been going through Advent, which is the season on the church calendar where we're just awaiting the arrival or getting ready for the arrival of Jesus, and going through the weeks of Advent, hope and peace and joy and love. And so this week we are on peace, and I've been following the lectionary, which is like a church calendar, a set group of verses that some churches use every single week, and I've been using it for Advent. And it had this passage for this week on peace, and I'm grateful that I did it, because honestly, preaching Christmas is one of my least favorite things to do. That's probably not a good thing for the pastor to say, but it's just because it's year after year, and you guys know what's about to happen. You know, it's the same thing every year. And using the lectionary, someone else has picked these passages, and when I first looked at this, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. But then as the Lord worked with me over it, I thought, oh, I really get this. So I'm going to have 3 points today. I'm going to tell you what those are. The first thing we're going to see is the wasteland that sin creates. The second thing that we'll see is God's crazy plan to make things right. And the third thing is the audacious promise of peace. So this passage starts like this. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. A shoot from the stump of Jesse. For context, there are a whole bunch of passages in the Old Testament, starting like in Genesis, starting right after the fall, a whole bunch of passages that predict that God is going to send somebody to rescue his people from their problems that result from their sin. So God is going to send a deliverer. And for Israel, the language that they use is a Messiah. And we'll use that language now and again, but we borrow that language from the Bible, And we have a hard time, I think, grasping what a Messiah would really be. And for them, their Messiah is going to be a king that comes from the line of David, their most famous king. And David's dad was named Jesse. And so a shoot from the stump of Jesse. That's the reason that language is as it is in this passage. But it can be, I think, hard for us to get because we are not waiting for a religious Messiah. We are waiting for a political Messiah or political rescuer, but we're not waiting for a religious Messiah to come fix our world's problems. Now, last week I did talk about the second coming of Christ, and we are waiting for that, but I don't think we're waiting for that in the same way that they were waiting for this deliverer to come and deliver them imminently. So I think we probably get this more than we think we do, this expectation of a Messiah or deliverer, and we probably relate to it better than we think we do for two reasons. One, the Israelites were more political than we realized they were. Their Messiah, we think of their Messiah as a religious Messiah because he is, but they were a theocracy. Really, they were probably more political than they were religious in their expectations for their Messiah. He was going to be a king. He was going to come back and rescue them from Rome, from all their problems. I got to go over there years ago now to Jerusalem, and we were in Jerusalem, and they took us to this place called the Temple Treasures Institute, and this lady was talking to us, and so the temple that they did their sacrifices in, where God resided for the Jewish people, was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, and they've never had a temple since then. And you know what's on where the temple was? Who knows what is present where the temple was? It's the Dome of the Rock. You know what the Dome of the Rock is? It's like the third holiest site in Islam, and it sits where the temple was. During the first Iraq War, there were rabbis that were against the Western Wall, which is right there, praying that the Scuds that the Iraqis were lobbing at Israel would hit the Dome of the Rock so they could rebuild the temple. Like, they want to get up there. And this Temple Treasures Institute has all the stuff ready to rebuild the temple, all the things ready to start doing their sacrifices again. So this people, they're expecting this to happen. And this lady said something. She said, and oh, by the way, we're still expecting the Messiah to come. They're Jewish. So 3,000 years later, they're still waiting for the Messiah. She said, my husband could potentially be the Messiah because he's in the line of David. So that struck me because A, they're still waiting for a Messiah 3,000 years later. B, she knows her husband's lineage. I don't even believe you can know your lineage after 3,000 years. And C, she actually said that her husband could be a Messiah. I hope you think well of your spouse. But go ahead and ask my wife about that. We all know too much, you know what I mean? So they're waiting for this Messiah, but it's more political than we think. And I would say this too, we are more religious. We think we're waiting for a political deliverer, culturally, but we're more religious in how we think about our politics. In an increasingly secular society, politics is a religion, right? And so we elect politicians, but every 4 years we get what I would call a messianic fervor, where we tell everybody, this is the one, and they are going to change everything. Politics serves a religious function for him. And we even have this, a shoot from the stump of Jesse, that if we could just get this guy back, if we could just get Reagan back, if we could just get Obama back, if we could just get George Washington back, then everything would be okay. So we do carry this expectation that they carry that someone's going to come. And in this passage, and there's a handful of other passages that are like this one, where they say there's going to be a shoot or a branch from a stump. For years, I was like, I don't understand what they're talking about. But then someone put those cookies on the bottom shelf for me a few years ago. And do I have the picture from my backyard? So I cut down some stuff. It's like 6 months ago I cut this stuff down. And so I just cut down a bunch of branches. And someone said, when you cut them down, a buddy of mine told me, spray, because they're ready to suck up whatever when you cut a branch down, spray some Roundup on it, and then it'll just die because it's going to suck up all that Roundup. So I cut this branch about yay big and sprayed Roundup, and it did not die. And a month and a half later, what happens? A little shoot comes out of it. And so that is the picture. This is the scene that there's this thing that is dead and life is going to come out of it. That is what Isaiah is saying to them. And I think that's part of the reason for Advent, because we can get to a place of thinking, I think God is done in this part of our world, in this part of my life, in this part of their life, and I don't think any more life is going to show up there. And that's the image. When you go back to Isaiah 10, this image gets magnified. So I'm going to read a few parts of Isaiah 10 and go through this quickly. But Isaiah says, "Woe to Assyria," or God says, "the rod of my anger, the staff in their hands is my fury." So we're in a period of time where Israel has been not trusting the Lord for a long period of time. God has been telling them over and over again, there's going to be a consequence to this because you can't keep not trusting me without there being serious, serious bad things that happen. And he brings Assyria to bring judgment on Israel. Assyria, we learn about empires like Rome and Greece and Persia and Babylon. We don't learn about Assyria. Does anybody listen to Hardcore History by Dan Carlin? Any Hardcore History fans? You guys should check that out. He has one on Assyria. They are the biggest, baddest empire. They are bad people. They are bad men and women in Assyria. And that's who God brings as a tool against Israel. Against the godless nation Israel, I send Assyria. Against the people of my wrath, I command him to take spoil and seize plunder, to tread them down like the mire of the streets. The problem is that the Assyrian king thinks he is the one that's in control, not God. And so he makes the same mistake the Israeli leaders made, where they're just not following God, not trusting God, not paying attention to God. That's exactly what Assyria is doing. And that is really the essence of sin, is thinking that we are God and not paying attention to God. And so it says, when the Lord has finished all his work on Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he'll punish the speech of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the boastful look in his eyes. So he's going to use Assyria to bring judgment on Israel, and then he's going to bring judgment on Assyria. By the strength of my hand, this is the king of Assyria, I have done it. By my wisdom, for I have understanding. Just bookmark those words. Go a little bit further in chapter 10. I remove the boundaries of the people. I plunder their treasures. I bring down those who sit on thrones. That's the Assyrian king. A few verses later, God says, "Shall the axe boast over him who hews it, or the saw magnify itself against him who wields it, as if a rod should wield him who lifts it, or as if a staff should lift him who is not wood?" And then at the end of Isaiah 10, "Behold, the Lord God of hosts will lop the bows with terrifying power. The great in height will be hewn down, the lofty will be brought low. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon will fall by the majestic one." So this is like the picture we're left with. I thought about Mordor from The Lord of the Rings, where it's just a complete wasteland. So this is the end of Isaiah 10, the beginning of Isaiah 11, where a Messiah comes in. It's all just death and destruction. He's brought Assyria to bring judgment on Israel, because Israel is just like a deadened nation themselves. Like he's told them over and over again, the way you treat the poor, the way, I'm not listening to your worship anymore because your hearts are so far from me. And with the Assyrians as well, it's a hopeless situation because the pride and arrogance of the people has left them in that state. It was the same in the days of Jesus. In the days of Jesus, Israel had been under the thumb of the Romans, and before that the Greeks, and before that the Persians, and before that the Babylonians for about 600 years. They hadn't heard a definitive prophetic word from God for 400 years. It'd be easy for them to think he is done with us, like this is just dead. When Jesus is in his ministry, he declares the woes to the Pharisees who are their shepherds, but he says, "You are like sheep without shepherds because your religious leaders are so far from me. It's just wasteland." And for us, I think this is part of Advent. I'll ask the question, where has sin made a wasteland in your life? Are there parts of your life where it just looks increasingly difficult that there is going to be any type of shoot of life that comes from the stump that you're dealing with, or stumps that you're dealing with? Are there parts of your life, your heart, your family, your world that look like this scene from Mordor, either as a result of your own failure to trust the Lord in some areas of your life, or someone else's where you're experiencing the consequences, or likely both, where we've believed that we know better than God? One pastor I listened to in preaching this to his congregation asked them the question, What's the biggest mistake you've made in your life? That is a pretty fun question. We could probably spend a lot of time with that question. But then he said, likely it's the result of a time in your life where you thought, I know better than God, and you went all the way down that road and ended up experiencing some consequences because of it. I read an article this week about the causes of division in our country. And this lady lists like 9 consequences she thinks, and I thought, man, this is pretty good. And she ends with a picture of like a big knot that's tied real tight, that good luck getting it undone, and that I thought is like the wasteland of sin in our country. She said, social media has rewired the country. So it didn't connect people, it radicalized people. Algorithms reward outrage, conflict, and extremism. The loudest, angriest voices get the most visibility while moderate voices disappear. And so we as people live in different worlds based on the algorithm we're paying attention to. She said political parties, and I would add some churches, realize division is profitable. I've been saying this for 6 to 12 months now. I've been using this line, fear and anger pay the bills. For a news network, for a political party, and it can for a church. You get people mad, you get people scared, you can rally people. And so that's what our messaging has become. Here's what we stand for, and your neighbor wants to destroy the country. Donate now. And when that happens, everybody around you can start to look like the enemy. She said the collapse of trust in every major institution, which I think has been happening for probably 70 years. And she ended, when no one trusts the referee, the game becomes a brawl. She said, for the media abandoned neutrality for tribal loyalty. The outlets don't even pretend to be neutral anymore. They're audience targeting businesses. And so the news doesn't inform you. It affirms your worldview and keeps you locked in. And so we've got a couple different storylines. And each group thinks that the other group it's crazy or evil, or both. Economic stress has made people angrier and more reactive. And so put people under financial strain, and all of this gets magnified. Cultural shifts happen faster than people could process. So everything from gender norms to family structures to technology, entertainment values has been changing at warp speed, and we respond to that differently. Some people embrace it, some panic, some feel erased, some feel free, but there's always a backlash to change that happens that fast. She pointed out that foreign adversaries will exploit these cracks, that people, as a result of the last couple of years, have stopped talking to each other as much in real life. Like COVID did this to us, remote work does this to us, online communities can do this to us, political bubbles can do it. They reduce face-to-face interaction, and so it's easy to hate a caricature of a person online, and it's harder when someone is sitting across from you or next to you, which is part of the opportunity and the blessing of the church at this moment in our culture. And finally, she said there's a loss of a unifying narrative. So we have no common objective or shared mission as a nation. And so when we don't have a we, everything becomes an us versus them. And I thought that is the wasteland that we walk through. And what I appreciated about it was like the comprehensive nature of her assessment of this. And I can dial back through those things about how a lot of that stuff is just wrapped up in identity. If your identity isn't in what God says about you through the person of Christ, that you have been redeemed and you were loved and you were made in the image of God, if that's not core to your identity, you're going to find it someplace else. And division is going to be a part of the someplace else that you're going to find it. There's wasteland. I sent out a podcast on Friday in the Weekly, and these two guys were talking about how amongst Gen Z, there is a bit of a revival happening. And so a couple years ago, we saw this at, how many people remember this, at Asbury College in Kentucky? There was just students flocking there for weeks on end, worshiping. I mean, it was awesome. And you didn't know, like, this isn't going to be everything, but it's something. And the numbers, like, just even in Britain, have borne this out, that amongst that young generation, there are more and more people that are exploring faith or returning to faith or coming to faith for the first time, really, and church attendance is increasing. And so these guys were talking about this, and I've heard other people say this too, that they think the reason they're doing it is because they know the foundations underneath the secular worldview that we've been living out for 50 to 100 years is crumbling. Like, it's not working, and so they're thinking there has to be something better. They're responding to a wasteland. These guys talked about they quoted an Oxford scholar who converted after a bunch of conversations with C.S. Lewis, who said, I realized I wasn't jumping from like one firm shelf to a higher firm shelf, but the shelf I was on was completely crumbling, and Jesus was the option I had in front of me, and then I realized that he was the truth. This guy wrote, between the probable and proved, there yawns a gap. Afraid to jump, we stand absurd, then see behind us sink the ground, and worst, our very standpoint crumbling. Desperate dawns our only hope to leap into the word, capitalized W, word, Jesus, that opens up the shuttered universe. I think there is wasteland in each, like there's just parts of our lives. Like I know most of you in here, and I know that you've been following Jesus. And so there are parts of our lives where the stump has turned into like a bush or a tree because God has redeemed it. But there's other parts of our lives where we're still feeling the effects of this. And I drove to Knoxville this week. My daughter's in Knoxville. We are her landlord, and so I had to go take care of a few things. So I had 12 hours in the car between Tuesday and Wednesday, which I kind of relish. And the first 3 of them were just me in silence in the car, taking time to be tired and to be sad about a few things that I didn't realize I had been sad about from the last few months. And this line that I heard years ago that I'll never forget came into my mind. Every loss deserves a proper amount of lament, whether it's the loss of your favorite person or the loss of your favorite pen. And the guy that said that went on to say that he was talking to pastors. He said ministry, but life can devolve into a series of unlamented losses where we just keep going because we don't know what to do about the loss. And I think this passage and this vision of a stump that is dead like calls us to just, it's okay to be sad. There are things to be sad about. What relationship in your life, what ailment in your body, what crisis have you been facing, what family member are you desperate for, where there are just stumps. That's where this starts, the wasteland that sin creates. Now, I'm going to skip the middle part of the passage, which is the crazy thing God does to fix it, and go to the end, the audacious promise of peace. The word peace in Hebrew is shalom. Shalom is not necessarily the absence of conflict, it's the presence of harmony. It's a more comprehensive word for peace than we typically use. And when I first read that, it was in a book that said that he defined sin as any violation of God's shalom, of the way things are supposed to be. That was the title of the book, subtitle of the book, not the way things are supposed to be. And so God paints a picture of this in these verses that is really an audacious picture of peace. So how many of you have had someone say something audacious to you within the last couple weeks where you're like, that's just not true? Yeah, so how many of you have turned on a TV in the last few weeks? Because that's what's going to happen. When I was going out to Knoxville, part of what I wanted to do was talk to the property manager at this place where we bought this deal for Abigail, because she had sent us an email that said, hey, over break, your kids are going to be gone for like a month, and if the temperature in Knoxville gets below 32 degrees, you need to set the temperature in your unit at 72 degrees, and you need to drip your faucets. How many of you know what it means to drip your faucets? How many people are from the north? So I went into her office. I said, lady, I'm from Wisconsin. If we dripped our faucets at 32 degrees in Wisconsin, so our faucets would be dripping for 6 months out of the year. Like, I know that's not true. Like, what is really going on here, And she said, well, yeah, we had this insurance claim against us a few years ago, and if we get one more, we're going to have to self-insure. So I had to say something astronomical to get people's attention to do what I want them to do. And I thought, this is the way the world works, This passage, when you just look at it, this is crazy, right? The wolf shall dwell with the lamb. That's not how that works. That's not how it works in the Bible. Jesus is the good shepherd that's going to protect us from the wolves. He tells the elders of the church to look out for the wolves that want to devour the sheep. And the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. How many of you have watched a show over the years where a leopard chases something down and the leopard always wins? This made me think of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Anybody? And just listen to that theme song again this week, and the goat never does well in these things. The calf and the lion and the fattened calf. The fattened calf is in real trouble here, They'll lie down together, and a little child shall lead them. which I think is an allusion to Jesus is going to be in the line of David. David, when he is talking about what qualifies him to be the king, talks about killing the lion and killing the bear. But here, we have a king that will tame them. He is going to do something beyond what we've seen. The cow and the bear shall graze, the young shall lie down together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Like this just seems crazy. Like that seems implausible. But I think that's the point. I think he wants to get at the thing in your heart that seems completely implausible and say, whatever that thing is, whatever that stump is, however dead it seems, that's where I'm going to bring life. And then this one, the nursing child, so like infant, shall play over the hole of the cobra. In the weaned child, toddler, shall put his hand on the adder's den. That is bad parenting right there, you know? Like, I hate snakes. Some people don't like spiders. Spiders are fine. Snakes, can't do it. This, like, evokes something in me. We were in Dallas a couple weeks ago. We stayed with John Foucher's sister, and she was talking, I swear this was her, talking about someone built a house in West Texas, and they were trying to move into the house, and the wife was going to take some stuff downstairs into the basement. She like ran back up and said, "We got to get out of here," because there was a bunch of rattlesnakes in the basement. They were coming through the walls in the basement. Think Indiana Jones, like that type of thing. And it turns out they had built the house on something called a rattlesnake warren. And I don't know what that is, but I don't need to know what that is. Like, they had to tear the house down because you can't do it. Like, this stuff freaks me out. When our kids were, when we just had two, when they were really little, Bobby Joe called me one day, and she'd come home from the store. She was getting our second, Matthew, out of the car to carry him in. But Michael, she had let out, and he had stepped over on the brick steps up the side of our house. A rattlesnake was just laying right there, and he had stepped over it and freaked us out. She called the neighbor, who was a truck driver. He came with a shovel and did what's appropriate to do with snakes, you know? That's like a nightmare. But I think that's what he's saying. He's tapping into, like, what's your nightmare? Because whatever it is, I'm going to make it right. I've got more power than it. I'm going to overcome your worst fear. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. The earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And our problem, what gets us into our wasteland messes, is not having knowledge of the Lord or ignoring the knowledge of the Lord. And he said, the earth will be full of it as the waters cover the sea. Whatever the wasteland is, whatever you could dream for that, I think this is part of Advent. Don't give up that dream. Like, he wants to tap into this part of you that has lost hope of a coming peace, and he wants to renew it. He said for a lot of us, he started to do this in different parts of our lives, but it's progressive, and he's saying look forward because he's going to finish the job. And one of the problems is that we can normalize the wasteland because we don't see anything happening. We know we can't do anything about it, and so we settle in the wasteland. And we think the wasteland is all that there is, and we tend to obsess over the wasteland and not look at the places where God has brought life. And then we start to experience a deadness spiritually inside of us, and he wants to call us out of that. One of these commentators had quoted a line from C.S. Lewis that I've used a number of times before, but Lewis says, "It would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday by the sea. We are far too easily pleased." He, with that audacious promise of hope, of peace, is giving us vision to say, this is what's possible. This is what's possible in me. And he's calling us into that. Whatever that wasteland is for you, whatever it is that you've realized you're sad about, he has the power and the will, and he's going to change it. Relationships will be restored, hard hearts will be softened, bodies will be redeemed. And we may not be able to see a way, but that's part of Advent, is he has done it, and he will continue to do it, and he will finish it. And so God's crazy plan to make things right, because he is not the Savior that they thought they needed, and he is not the Savior that we think we need. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And so there is hope, but like a branch doesn't seem like it's going to do it. You know, those branches in my backyard, those little shoots, I'm not going to hang a tire swing off of them just yet. You know, it seems like this is not the answer. Like, they're vulnerable, and I am going to chop them down and burn that stump, you know, like, but this is the promise, and that is kind of Christmas. That's what he did. Jesus comes as an infant. That is a crazy plan. He could have died any number of ways, you know. I don't know what the infant mortality rate was in the days of Jesus, but I guarantee it was pretty high. Sickness could have taken him out. Violence, when they were going from to Bethlehem from Galilee, like anything could have taken him out. Snakes, I bet there were tons of snakes there that could have taken him out. You know, Herod tried to take him out. He came in a totally vulnerable way, and that's not how we think of the leaders that are going to take us to the place that we're supposed to go. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. This is Jesus at his baptism. Jesus in Luke 4, when he goes into the synagogue at Capernaum and says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." It's just a different type of leader accessing different types of resources. If we had a politician today that said, "My platform is that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me," they're not getting elected, right? Because they're going to do different things. And he says the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And this is exactly opposed to the king of Assyria's language in chapter 10. In chapter 10, the king of Assyria says, "By the strength of my hand I have done it, by my wisdom, for I have understanding." But the Messiah is going to come with the spirit of God's wisdom and understanding, with the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord that is going to come from the Spirit. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear. He will lead in a way that other leaders never would. There are echoes of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in these passages, that we are going to trust what our eyes see and our ears hear, but he is going to trust in the Spirit of the Lord. With righteousness he shall judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. The breath of his lips shall kill the wicked, which is probably the wicked one, the evil one. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. And so he is going to care for the least of these, and he's going to know what to do about it. You know, Graham a couple weeks ago was talking about Jesus calling the children to him, and the children were the least of these. And that's the point that he was making. But he's going to know how to do it. We pay lip service to it, you know. We don't know what to do about the poor and the homeless. We don't know. I was talking to Ben last night, who runs the Smithfield Rescue Mission, about the complicated nature of those issues. We don't know what to do with the elderly and the infirm. That's what Social Security's for, but we took the money and spent it on other stuff, and it's all going to run out like the year I'm eligible for it, which is great. But they're going to have to fix that, right? Because taking away people's money that you took years and years ago, it almost caused a revolution in Nicaragua. It almost caused one in France. If you get the French people worked up like that, like, you got a problem. We don't know what to do with it. The immigrant, we don't know what to do with it. He does. We talk about justice and equity all the time. We're obsessed with it, and we should be. But we don't know what to do about it. And I read this week. It was from a French philosopher who wrote a book in the 50s called The Technological Society. He said, efficiency is a fact, and justice is a slogan. And I dug down on that, and I think he got it. Efficiency as a fact means that the relentless pursuit of the one best means has become the dominant, objective, unavoidable force shaping all aspects of modern civilization. Efficiency is an observable reality that dictates actions and decisions without moral judgment. Justice as a slogan means that traditional human values, ethical considerations, and ideals like justice and freedom have been marginalized. They're often claimed as noble goals, but have little to no actual influence on the direction of technical development or societal organization. I think that's just true. We pay it lip service, but we don't know what to do about it. He does, and he will get it right. And That's what he's promised. And it's just not going to make sense to us. One pastor, in talking about this, used the illustration of strategic planning. He said strategic planning is when you have like a vision of where you want to be, and then you back out of it to how do you get from here to there? How do you plan? And so he said if 2,000 years ago when Jesus was born, you needed a plan so that 2,000 years later, his name was the best known name on the face of the earth. More people know the name of Jesus than any other name 2,000 years later. And a quarter of the people on the planet kind of gear their life around the way of life and the teachings of Jesus. And his teachings are known philosophically, morally, psychologically as like the greatest teaching in the history of the world. So if you wanted to get there, here's what you would not do. You wouldn't go into a meeting and say, let's have him born on just the fringes of society, like someplace no one is paying attention to at all, and that is Israel. Israel is like nowhere, and there's Rome, and there's Parthia, and Galilee is nowhere in Israel. You know, if you wanted someone born on the fringes of society in our world, where would they be born? Pardon me? West Virginia. Could well be. Haiti. Somalia. Pardon me? Benson. Someone said Benson. Good. Yeah, just like we wouldn't do that. You'd have them born in New York City or Paris or Rome or London. Have them never engage with the significant places or people of the world. Have a band of followers who are underperforming and have no real influence. How about this? Right when you're starting to get some traction, let's have you die the most culturally disgraceful death that's ever existed in the history of the world. And then you'll disappear off the scene completely after 3 years of anybody knowing anything about you and turn the movement over to these underqualified followers. No one leaves that strategic planning meeting saying, we nailed that, we got it, this is the plan. But that's how Jesus works. And the crazy plan is grace instead of law. That's the essence of the crazy plan. That audacious promise of peace is the opposite of survival of the fittest. It is surrender to the king. We're not going to get what we deserve, which is wasteland. He will take what we deserve. He will end up in the spiritual wasteland of experiencing separation from his Father, and he'll take that for us so that we can get what he deserves, which is fellowship with the Father. His power will be made perfect in our weakness. And that grace will be like the power plant of things happening in the world. And that, when someone loves enough to give up what they have and maybe deserve in service of another, this is, our art points to this, our movies, our TV shows points to this so often. Because that, like, there's something in that just keeps us going, and that is the essence of the gospel. And it's hard to stay in on, but that's what he's called us to. I asked you earlier, what's the greatest mistake you made? Well, what's the thing you did that Jesus called you to that just made no sense at the time? And I know a bunch of you have done that, and I have too. And those are probably the greatest decisions we ever made. But in the moment, we thought, what are we doing? And this is what he's calling us to. So let me finish this. Acknowledge that wasteland. Don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not there. Don't panic. Like, he's calling you to sit in that for a few minutes. Embrace that audacious promise of peace. Reclaim that. There's a vulnerability about hoping in that way. But he's calling you into that vulnerability that Christ demonstrates for us in his life. And let God call you into the crazy. Whatever he wants to do in your life, it's not going to look like what the world is calling you to do. It's a different kingdom. And so believe first in his grace towards you, that we do not get what we deserve. He got what we deserved, and he gives us what we don't deserve because of his love for us. And that grace towards you will bring peace within you. And then when you express that grace that he's given you towards the people around you, that will bring peace around you. This passage ends, in that day, the root of Jesse who shall stand as a signal for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. And that is Jesus, and that is in a lot of ways a vision for the church, that we would be a place where his name is declared in this his resting place, that people can rest in here and who he is, and there be a glory from him. Father, thanks for this passage. We're grateful for how you've woven the story into the entirety of the Bible, Lord, and have made it happen in ways that we could never have planned or expected. We could never have schemed up, Lord. It is counterintuitive to the way that we think and the way our world works. And God, thank you that you have done that in the past, you are doing that in the present, and you will do that in the future. I pray for the areas in our lives where we don't want to look at it, where it's just hard, where things seem hopeless, that we could surrender those again to you, that we could look at the promises that you've made, and that you would give us the faith and the courage and the strength to believe, and that we would follow you into places that don't make sense, because those are the places where you seem to work most often. We love you and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.